Hi, my name is Ray Grieselhuber. Thank you for attending my session on WorldView today. Just to give you a little bit of background about who I am and what I do, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called DemandSphere. Uh, we are a data platform for AI search visibility. We've been in business for over 15 years now, and we have a long history in Japan. I'll share a little bit about that just so you have some context. We started the company in 2009 in Tokyo when I was living there. And we work with pretty much all of the major retailers, internet companies, and agencies in that market. And outside of Japan, we work with primarily mid market to enterprise brands and agencies as well. And some of them also need support within the Japanese market from a data and solutions perspective. So we do a lot of that type of work as well. I've got a fantastic team in Japan. Here's one of our pictures from some events that we've done. We've actually grown since then, and they're some of the best people in the industry. So today I'm going to be talking about some of the major things that are relevant, I believe, to understanding how AI and search are playing out in the market. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is because we're actually going to be doing an event in October called FoundConf, and we have some of the best speakers both from Japan and outside of Japan. You probably recognize some of these faces and names, but I'll be talking more about this at the very end of the event. But we're doing this really as a way to help people who are in Japan understand the world outside of Japan from a search perspective. And also, there's always a lot of curiosity outside of the Japanese market. And so we're trying to bring more people to Japan to get a better feeling of what things look like there, too. So, when we think about Japan, there's a lot of images I think that come to people's minds. And I'm going to talk about potentially dispelling a few of these later. But overall, it's a very interesting market. It moves very fast and very slow at the same time in certain ways. And I think it's useful to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the underlying cultural forces that shape these major trends in the Japanese market. So, I'm a data guy, so usually I spend a lot of time during my presentations going pretty deep into data. And I'm excited to talk today because I'm gonna have the opportunity to spend a little bit more time on culture, language. What are the reasons that certain things are happening there versus how they may be occurring outside of this really interesting market? So a little bit of data after I say that, just to start off with, just so there's some context. Google is by far the most dominant search engine in Japan. And they actually grew a lot last year. Their market share about a year ago was 75%, and they're well over 85% now. So they're really closing in on what we see outside of the Japanese market. But for a long time, it was not nearly that high. Yahoo Japan has been a player there for a long time. They continue to lose market share there every year, but they still do have a notable presence, and Bing also has a notable presence as well. So the search market, I think, in the Western markets, we tend to kind of think that it's all or nothing. But there's actually, multi-billion-dollar search opportunities, even if you have a few percentage points of the overall market share. So these are still big operations, and they're not going anywhere. But Google is continuing to gain share. And then from an AI perspective, ChatGPT is definitely the largest in terms of market share right now on the Gen AI search side of things. That being said, I think that Gemini uh, as it starts to gain more traction in the US, I don't think we'll see a Gemini as a destination type of adoption in Japan, but once AI mode comes to Japan, it's going to be game on for sure. The AI overviews just launched in Japan a few months back. They tend to be about 6 months behind the US market, 6 to 8 months in general. And so when that happens, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to the ChatGPT market share. Um, my general feeling on most of this is your Google is usually a pretty safe bet. They may stumble a little bit up front, but they're not messing around, and I think they've proven that over the last year in particular. So we will see. Um, and then like I said, what I want to do today is focus a little bit more on the cultural drivers in search and AI usage, because I think this is going to really help people understand more why people do certain things and some of the linguistic influences that's going to influence searcher behavior as well. So one of the first things, probably anyone who has had a cursory exposure to Japan, whether it's through movies or games or just interest in studying the language, you're probably aware that they have more than one character set for their language. What this means, though, is that it actually has a pretty interesting effect on how searcher behavior actually occurs. And so the main four character sets they have, one is called Romaji, which is basically like Western letters, Western alphabets. And they have katakana and hiragana and kanji. And so because of these, you can actually express quite a bit of meaning and nuance in very short query strings. And so in general, when we look at our data, Japanese queries tend to be a little bit shorter on average than what you would see in other languages, especially Western languages. And the reason is because, for example, the first one in using the Western alphabet, the word apple, that can mean, just as it does in English, either Apple the company or Apple the brand. But if you're in katakana, which is the one of the character sets they use to represent foreign words, apuru, this just means Apple the company. There's no way anyone's going to think of that being a fruit. And then the third one is hiragana, and this was supposed to be a apple, a fruit apple, but I guess the PDF compression kind of messed it up. But I will be sharing my slides. But just picture this red blob as an apple, like a fruit. Um, and in hiragana, this is going to be dingo, and that just means like the fruit apple. And then in kanji, this is just the kanji for dingo, which is apple as well. So you can represent it two ways. And so you get a lot of specificity just based on the character set that you're using. And so that has always kind of tended towards a lot of additional nuance that gets played in there. So it's something that brands in particular need to pay attention to when they think about how their brands are being represented in the Japanese language, because there can be some, and there often are, some very interesting surprises. One example that we saw was there was a Spanish leather bag making company, Loewe, and it's spelled Loewe. Well, that sounds a lot like Lowe's, the home improvement store, right? And so there is some interesting things around that in the data that I can't go into too much detail, but you might be able to imagine that. So what is interesting then is when you start thinking about localization, I've seen so many failed localization projects that really come down to a couple of things. One is localization. Localization tends to get viewed as just, oh, we're just going to translate it into Japanese and we'll be good to go. And there's no real consideration given for um, is this saying something the way that a Japanese person would say it? Is this saying something the way, more importantly for our purposes, is this saying something the way that a Japanese person would search for it? And that is how you can not gain any market share if you don't really get that one right. So localization, both from a site and product perspective, but also from a search optimization perspective, whether you're talking about SERPs or Gen AI experiences or anything else, you really have to understand that. And that includes both text and media, multimodal type searches. So this, I'm picking on New Balance here a little bit, but they're obviously a great company. I'm just showing, I see this a lot, and it's a difficult problem. I don't even blame the teams involved. It's a very challenging thing to do proper localization of text and images for a global brand in all the different markets, especially one that has so many complicated facets to it, like you would see in the Japanese market. But this is the Japanese version of the site, and there is non-Japanese people imagery showing all over the place, which may or may not be an issue. It depends on your strategy and your product positioning. But in general, you want to obviously have like actual Japanese people in your product photography, and the language and everything else is just it feels very Western, and so there's definitely room for improvement on this sort of localization. And what this also means is when we're looking at how language is shifting, And what Google is trying to do in relation to all of this, they're actually trying to get people, I think partly in response to AI, but also um, just for a number of other reasons that we'll talk about. They're trying to get people to do longer queries, basically, long story short. So they actually ran TV ads promoting how to do semantic searches in Japan. So you never really see Google's, running ads in the U.S. on, on TV or probably UK or anything else. But they were running this. I couldn't find a good screen grab of the video of that ad, so I just grabbed one from Google Cloud Next in Tokyo because they're doing an event next month, and we're we're friends with the Google Cloud team. I think it's an event you should go to if you're going to be around. But in general, it's very interesting that they're promoting it. So I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why that is going forward. But I think it's partly related to they're trying to promote long tail queries in general, and they want to see more specific types of searches so they can more accurately capture that user intent. And there's also going to be things that really matter for them from a Gen AI perspective and also local as well. So I think one of the other reasons for this too is ChatGPT, as I mentioned, is very popular. I would say within the kind of tech savvy demographics, it's equally as popular in the Japanese market as it is outside of Japan, in the Western markets. And so this is definitely very similar to what we're seeing, in our own markets. We're seeing uh, query length increasing, more informational type of queries are being run. Obviously, even more generative types of queries are being run. And so this impact, this influence from ChatGPT is changing how people search, even on Google. You go back to Google search, AIOs, people are starting to get trained to realize that they're going to see certain types of AIOs when they search differently. So all of this is going to have a long-term impact on how people search. And one of the other things that I think is really interesting about the Japanese market is this is also reflected in what I was talking about earlier, where Google, yeah, they're dominant. They're 85%, but still, I mean, you talk about 15% of a search market. That's a massive opportunity for any company. So they're going to be, the market in general, in terms of the people, especially within, kind of younger, tech savvy, forward thinking crowds. They're very curious. They always want to test out the latest things that are coming from the West, especially. And so AI adoption was very fast. Again, ChatGPT was the winner, but there was a lot of people, even 3, 4, or 5 months ago, a lot of people were looking at Perplexity and Copilot a little bit. But so you have this really interesting. I could go on forever about how Japan kind of just is the importer and the adapter of so many different things in the world, but you really see that play out with this sort of search technology. And in general, I would say that this is not just my own opinion. We see this and a lot of the mainstream research and reporting as well, but in our own experiences as well as we're working with consumer research and so forth. Japanese people in general, they view AI favorably. There's this kind of image that Japan has always been way ahead on robotics. I'm going to talk about that more here in a minute. And so AI, robotics, and like the sort of very forward-thinking technology are generally viewed favorably. But interestingly and kind of surprisingly, it's the adoption can be a little bit slower than you think it would be. We actually saw this even early on, 10, 15 years ago with SaaS markets. The adoption of SaaS, software as a service platforms, was much like years slower in the Japanese market than it was in the West. And it's just because at upper management levels, in a lot of these larger companies, especially non-internet companies, um, the Nikkei 225 type of companies, it's just an older crowd that are running these businesses still, and it's a little bit more hierarchical, and so things change. I would say that this is changing a little bit, but things still do move a little bit slower when it comes to this sort of technology adoption. And this is always a surprise when I talk to people. There's for anyone who hasn't been to Japan, and I start talking about, I've spent a lot of time in Japan and so forth, a lot of what I get immediately is like, oh, it must be super high technology. Everyone thinks immediately of like Akihabara and like all of the electronics, which is almost like more of a legacy holdover at this point from the 80s and 90s, more of a curiosity than anything. in my opinion anyway. And people have this image of all the robotics and everything else, but really in a day to day life, it's the infrastructure is amazing. It's very clean. There is obviously technology everywhere, but in terms of like overall technology adoption, I wouldn't say that you are going to see much more advanced technology really than we see anywhere else. And so my way of joking about that is I always just say it's not all flying robots. It's it's a modern city, but also interestingly is there's still a very large rural segment of Japan that has its own struggles. You've got aging populations and elderly, people being supported by younger demographics that don't have nearly the same number of people that previous generations had. And so, a couple of these photos here that I have are kind of interesting to think about because you can go 45 minutes outside of Tokyo and you'll see scenes like this. And Tokyo is like one of the most modern cities in the world. And so you'll see, just very traditional, very rural, not technology savvy, populations just right outside the city. So it really, a lot of it does happen in these bigger cities, Tokyo, Osaka. And again, they're still a little bit slow to adopt compared to what most people would think. One other interesting aspect of how a lot of this stuff plays out is Google. They are trying very hard to promote good local search experiences in Japan. It can be a struggle. One recent example that happened was when they rolled out AI overviews. They were trying to do a test where they just picked one city, I think, within Osaka City called Kita Ward, and people started. You can search this on Twitter too. People started noticing, or X, I should say. People started noticing that this Kita Ward Osaka City was showing up in searches that were completely irrelevant to it, like just randomly showing up, and it was kind of funny. So I think one example here was a couple of different examples, but one example was just about like you know, some dish, and for some reason, Kita Ward kept coming up all over the place. So it kind of backfired, but again, I don't really fault them for that. It's something that is challenging. They've had other struggles with local as well. We talk more about. I think it's important that they are successful over the long term. One of the reasons is there's a huge, and you'll see this if you ever come, or if you have been there, you probably know what I'm talking about. But there is a massive small business community in Japan where there's just ton. Obviously we have this everywhere, but there's a really distinctive flavor that you see to a lot of the local shops and businesses, and they're similar to what you would see in the U.S. and probably U.K. and other countries as well. There is this big box phenomenon, right, where nationwide service providers and brands and chain retail, all these, they're very effectively dominating things at a nationwide level, but they're not always that great at the local level. And the local businesses do tend to do very well on some of the local search directories that have existed for a long time. There's like Tabelog and a bunch of other companies. And Google is, I would say they have not yet nailed this, but they've gotten really good over the last few years, and they're going to continue as well. So I think what they're trying to do with local is admirable. It doesn't have to only be Google, of course. I think there's a lot of opportunity for this, but um, there definitely is a need for this on a cultural level. So just a few things I wanted to share on this. I know we don't have too much time today, so I'm going to wrap it up here, but I'll leave you with a few quick takeaways. One is from a brand and a market entry perspective. If you want to succeed in Japan, you really have to take time to understand the culture, the language, especially the multimodal types of things, understanding what localization truly means from a content creation, and also search optimization. And that's going to be even more important as we're talking about AI now. The second takeaway I would provide is it really takes a lot of time and a lot of investment to build a successful brand in Japan. I'm talking years, way longer than you think you would need to. So, I know there's always a lot of companies that talk about going to Japan for different reasons, and I would say unless it's one of those things where you feel like you have to do it at a strategic level, like there's a strategic mandate, I'd really make sure you understand why you want to go there. I've seen so many companies, billions of dollars just spent on not doing a proper job, ultimately, wasted on this. So it can be done, then it can be done very successfully, but you have to be, very much about your business. And the third one is I would say is conversely, the Japanese market is always, I think, open in many ways, and it's very, it's like the consumers are very curious. I think with AI in particular right now, there's a lot of just general curiosity and I think new types of optimism that we haven't seen for a while there. So it's great. I would say the people in general are very willing to try new things. So it's always a cool thing to try, but just make sure you know what you're doing and why you're doing it and what your level of commitment is, not just for your unit or your group, but all the way up to the very top of the chain. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, the Found conference that we're doing is going to be on October 28th and 29th. You can go to foundconf.com if you want to learn more. We've got Rand Fishkin, Lily Ray, Mike King, Elias Tabas, Noah Lerner, and then also some great, quite legendary speakers here. Go Sugihara, I've known for a long time, and Uragawa-san as well. We've got more coming too. So it would be probably one of the best opportunities to learn about this market if it's something that you're interested in. Thank you very much. I always like connecting with people, so I'm easy to find. You've seen my X handle and my speaker deck. I'm on LinkedIn, so track me down and let me know if you want to chat. Thank you.